I'd like to call the Subcommittee on Communications and Technology to order. Today we have a hearing and a markup on network neutrality and HJ Res 37, the resolution of disapproval I introduced to stop the FCC from regulating the Internet. This is our second hearing on this topic. On February 16, 2011, this committee had a 3-hour hearing with all 5 FCC commissioners. At the request of our Democrat colleagues, I delayed a previously scheduled markup and scheduled this hearing to shed even more light on the impact of the FCC's rules for deregulating the Internet, or for regulating the Internet. I have introduced the resolution under the Congressional Review Act, which provides Congress with an expedited process to nullify agency rules. The resolution only requires a simple majority in each chamber and is filibuster-proof in the United States Senate. Because the form of the resolution is provided for in statute, it is not subject to amendment. Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, an original co-sponsor of the CRA, has described the process as reasonable, sensible approach to regulatory reform, close quote. We have an open and thriving Internet thanks to our historical hands-off approach. The Internet works pretty well. It's the government that doesn't. However, on December 21, 2010, the FCC adopted rules regulating the Internet without statutory authority to do so. But before we get into the harm the government regulation of the Internet will cause, it's important to realize that the FCC's underlying theory of authority would allow the Commission to regulate any interstate commerce communication services on barely more than a whim and without any additional input from Congress. I do not want to cede such authority to the Federal Communications Commission. Section 230 of the Communications Act makes it U.S. policy to, quote, preserve the vibrant and competitive free market that presently exists for the Internet and other interactive computer services unfettered by federal or state regulation, close quote. Under the FCC's rationale, its authority is bounded only by its imagination. This new rule is little more than a weak attempt to do an end run around the D.C. Circuit's Comcast BitTorrent ruling that the FCC failed to show it had authority to regulate the Internet. And do my Democratic colleagues agree the FCC has the authority to regulate the Internet in coffee shops, and bookstores, and airlines, and other entities? Well, the FCC believes it has that authority, and in its rule it declined to subject those entities to their new regulations. My opinion, this is an agency exceeding its congressional authority, and its action will hurt investment and cost jobs. A small cable and Internet provider from my district recently wrote to me about her concerns, stating, and I quote, last spring, the FCC chairman primed the pump, threatening to apply portions of Title II of the 1934 Telecom Act to broadband. The cable industry has invested billions of dollars of private capital to build broadband and infrastructure to over 90% of American homes. Commissioners are looking in the rearview mirror, attempting to regulate the Internet of yesterday absent any market failure. How will companies like Ben Broadband be able to compete if we bear the brunt of the regulations while the giants like Google, Amazon, and Netflix go free? The Internet is evolving. All members of the ecosystem need to work together to innovate. The chairman has picked winners and losers in this recent effort to impose net neutrality regulations. These efforts will cost jobs, stall innovation, and dampen investment, close quote. This is not a partisan issue. In 2006, 58 Democrats voted with us on the House floor to oppose a network neutrality amendment to video legislation. Some of those Democrats are still on the full committee. Some are still on this subcommittee. And that was not a vote against a Title II versus a Title I approach. That was a vote against imposing network neutrality rules. There's no crisis warranting the FCC's deviation from our historical hands-off approach. Rather than show an actual problem, the Federal Communications Commission relies on speculation of future harm. The FCC even admits in the order that it conducted no market power analysis. See footnote 87. Dr. David J. Farber, grandfather of the Internet and former FCC chief technologist, warned on December 21, 2010 in an op-ed that the FCC's, quote, order will sweep broadband ISPs and potentially the entire Internet into the big tent of regulation. What does this mean? Customer needs take second place, and a previously innovative and vibrant industry becomes a creature of government rulemaking, close quote. This will also make it harder for upstarts to compete with web incumbents. New entrants will have fewer resources to advocate before the FCC, and will also lack the needed flexibility to strike creative deals to compete with web incumbents. As we will hear today, what is even more, quote, more universally damaging is the rule's potential to destroy the ability of infrastructure providers to raise capital that would threaten the infrastructure on which both customers and content providers rely. We'll also hear that the FCC's rule will transfer wealth from broadband providers to application providers, and I quote, "But that does not begin to grasp the problem for both parties. A transfer of wealth between two independent parties can be beneficial to one at the expense of the other. A transfer of wealth that will ultimately cripple the party on which the other relies for its very existence is profoundly harmful to both." These regulations will cost jobs. They will hinder the necessary investment in network upgrades on which customers and content providers rely, thus thwarting the competitive free market vibrancy and innovation of the Internet. Let's keep the Internet open and innovative. I urge my colleagues to support the resolution. With that, I'll recognize my friend from California, Ms. Eshoo, for an opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to...
With that, I will recognize my friend, the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman, for an opening statement as he needs to go to another committee hearing.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I want to thank my colleague, the ranking member of the committee, Representative Eshoo, for allowing me to go before her in making this statement. I want to thank you, Mr. Chairman, for agreeing to our request for a legislative hearing on H.J. Res. 37. It's a resolution of disapproval under the Congressional Review Act. Democrats on this subcommittee felt strongly that before we rush to consider this legislation, we would all benefit from hearing from companies, public interest groups, and economists. My concern is that there's an enormous disconnect between the facts and the majority's policy objectives. As we'll learn today, technology innovators oppose the disapproval resolution, consumers oppose the resolution, and economists oppose the resolution. Even broadband providers do not support the resolution. In a letter the committee received on Monday, the cable industry said it supports the FCC order because, and I quote, "It largely codifies the status quo which the industry has voluntarily committed. It contains helpful clarifying language around what constitutes reasonable network management. It provides greater certainty about our ability to manage and invest in our broadband services, and the alternative of Title II regulation presented a stark and much worse risk." We'll hear similar testimony from AT&T today. Yesterday, the Consumer Federation of America and Consumers Union released a poll showing the overwhelming public support for an open Internet. By a 2-to-1 margin, consumers opposed congressional action to block the FCC rule. But none of these facts seem to matter. The reason we are debating the disapproval resolution is that Republicans claim that FCC regulation will stifle the Internet and hurt our economy. But the fastest growing, most innovative companies in America, companies like Google, Amazon, Netflix, and others say exactly the opposite. They urge the FCC to adopt open Internet rules because, I quote, "Baseline rules are critical to ensuring that the Internet remains a key engine of economic growth, innovation, and global competitiveness." In fact, most of the Internet companies wanted stronger rules than those adopted by the FCC. I wanted to get independent advice, so our staff contacted economists at Stanford, NYU, USC, and other leading academic institutions. They told us that the FCC got the rules right. The phone and cable companies have near monopolies as providers of Internet access, especially wireless Internet access. Without sensible regulation, they could choke off innovation by charging Internet companies for the right to communicate with consumers. One of the costs of this misguided resolution is that it is distracting us from important telecommunications issues that we should be addressing, and we could do so on a bipartisan basis. We ought to be working together to grow our economy by freeing up spectrum. We should be working together to make our nation safer by building a broadband network for public safety, and we should be protecting taxpayers and consumers by enacting universal service reform. But we're doing none of these things. Instead, we're wasting time about a destructive resolution that should threaten openness and innovation on the Internet. I thank our witnesses for being here. I look forward to your testimony, and I want to yield the balance of my time, Mr. Markey.
Thank you, Mr. Waxman, very much. Why is the Internet so important? It enables freedom of expression and the sharing of ideas across town or around the world. It prevents a single entity, whether it's a broadband behemoth or the government, from exercising total control. It is a vital tool that helps small businesses compete and expand, pumping life into our economy. That is what an open Internet is all about. One of our witnesses here this morning, Robin Chase, embodies the importance of an open Internet to our economy. Ms. Chase co-founded and ran Zipcar, a car-sharing service that's available in more than 200 cities across the U.S. She used the open nature of the Internet to build her innovative business from the ground up without having to ask permission from Verizon, AT&T, Comcast, or any other carrier for permission. Here are Zipcar's current numbers: 474 full-time employees, $186 million in revenue, 540,000 members. That's what the open Internet means to our economy. This debate we're having today is not just a solution in search of a problem, it is a resolution in search of a problem. If we want to move forward here in a way that deals with this issue, Comcast agrees they can live with these rules. AT&T agrees they can live with these rules. The key to the Internet is ensuring that it's open so that new companies, new applications, new gadgets are being invented on a daily basis in hundreds and thousands of cities across our country that utilize this engine for economic growth as a way that keeps America's lead over the rest of the world. That is what makes us great, the open Internet. If we allow a small number of companies to control how fast that change, that innovation moves, then we will be stifling our ability to continue to be the engine of growth in the world, using the Internet as our way of revolutionizing the rest of the world. If we did not have an open Internet, no Facebook, no Twitter, Hulu, YouTube. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for extending graciously that extra time to me.
Thank the gentleman from Massachusetts. I would now turn to the chairman of the full committee, Mr. Upton, for opening statement.
I would just thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just remind my friend from Massachusetts that we have all of those, and we don't have net neutrality now. I urge my colleagues to support H.J. Res. 37 that nullifies the FCC's attempt to regulate the Internet. President Obama has said it is now his priority to focus on jobs. He has also said that his administration will avoid onerous and unnecessary regs that stifle investment and innovation. In fact, in a January executive order, the President said that agencies must base regulations on a reasoned determination that their benefits, in fact, justify their costs. While the executive order does not apply to independent agencies, like the FCC, the President urged such agencies to follow it, and FCC Chair Cicconi has said that he does agree with the order's principles. Well, if the FCC had taken this approach for the last year, we might not have needed this resolution today. The reality is that if the FCC was truly weighing the costs and benefits of its action, that the agency would not be attempting to regulate the Internet. There is no crisis warranting intervention. The Internet is open, and it's thriving precisely because we have refrained from regulating it. Imposing these rules will cause more harm than good by chilling the very investment and innovation that we need to ensure that the Internet keeps pace with the growing demands being placed on it. This will only hurt our economy. The Internet is not broken. The market has not failed. To justify its power grab for a favored sector, the FCC is simply speculating about the possibility of future harm. Apparently, they never heard the old phrase, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it." Well, we can go one step further. As the late James Quello, who served as a Democratic FCC commissioner, said, "If it ain't broke, don't break it." The FCC actually confesses in the order, albeit in the footnotes, that it did not conduct a market analysis. Where is the rigorous cost-benefit analysis and demonstration of need? We've reviewed the response to our follow-up, and quite frankly, it's lacking. They point to paragraphs that contain little more than conclusory statements or summaries of comments. Let's be clear. I do not believe we should be regulating the Internet. But if we follow the FCC's logic, the agency would ultimately be regulating Google and any number of other Internet companies. Press accounts indicate that Google engages in subjective prioritization of some search results over others. This not only affects what traffic Internet users see, it also can have a financial impact on websites. Should the FCC be determining whether Google is engaged in unreasonable discrimination? Is Google's traffic management reasonable? Would it be appropriate for the government to intervene because of the possibility of future harm without an analysis of current problems or market power? I think not. Not for Google and not for anybody else. Ultimately, there is a question of authority. The FCC has changed its story about where it gets the power to issue these rules more times than it has uttered the word transparency. Each time it teeters from one weak explanation to another based on the most legal or political impediment it is facing. None are consistent with its own precedent, and all are end runs around the D.C. Circuit's decision in the Comcast case that the FCC has failed to show its authority in the space. For these reasons, I urge my colleagues to vote for the resolution, and I yield the balance of my time to my friend, the Chairman Emeritus, Mr. Barton.
Thank you, Chairman Upton. You gave an excellent explanation of why we should all support H.J. 37. To be as succinct as possible, the Internet has thrived, I think, in large part because this Congress repeatedly has stated that we did not want it to be regulated. And the FCC keeps attempting to get some nose under the tent, so to speak, so that in the future they could come back with real heavy-handed regulation. This latest attempt, the 3-2 vote, in my opinion, is simply an effort to establish the principle that the FCC can regulate the Internet. It's not as important what they do now, but the fact that they have the authority to do it. H.J. 37 would explicitly say they do not have the authority. As Chairman Upton has just said, if it's not broke, don't fix it. All these great things that are happening under a deregulated environment, and we should keep it that way. With that, I yield back to the subcommittee chairman.
Thank the gentleman for their opening statement. I would now yield to the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Eshoo, for 5.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, and all of my colleagues, and to the witnesses. Thank you for being here today. Given the significance of the resolution under consideration today, I want to thank Chairman Walden for respecting the request of the ranking member of the full committee, Mr. Waxman, myself, and members of the subcommittee to have a legislative hearing. I think it's essential that members of the subcommittee have an opportunity to hear from key stakeholders who are here today before voting on a resolution that would overturn the FCC's open Internet rules. It's so fascinating to me to listen to the statements that members make. This is all about an open and free Internet. In fact, those words are really the hallmarks of the Internet. All of the reasons that my Republican colleagues are saying they're doing this is fascinating because the stakeholders themselves are on the other side of the issue. They do not believe that the light touch of the FCC is menacing. In fact, they have said and weighed in, and we know the testimony, you've seen it, not only the testimony, but the letters that have poured into this committee of groups and organizations across the country, from religious leaders to consumer organizations to high technology associations. They have all weighed in and said, don't do this. So it's fascinating to me that they say that they're for an open Internet after reviewing the record of where there have been abuses. We want to see consumers making the choice, not corporations. We want companies to grow, to be successful, and there is a long, long, long list of them. So many of them constituent companies from my congressional district. I think that everyone here really needs to think very carefully about the direct and indirect consequences of passing this resolution. Disapproving the FCC's rule is a serious threat to our economy, and I think it's a direct attack on transparency. It could also lead to further uncertainty in areas beyond the December order, such as the FCC's ability to promote public safety and ensure online safeguards that prevent piracy and protect children from accessing harmful internet content. As I said or alluded to a moment ago, the history of an open internet speaks for itself. Businesses that rely on an open internet continue to grow. An open internet continue to grow. A stunning example is eBay. In just over 15 years, it's gone from a living room startup to a company that enables hundreds of thousands of American small businesses and entrepreneurs to sell their goods to consumers across the country and around the world. The significance to our economy is enormous. It's actually stunning. $60 billion in goods sold on eBay marketplaces globally in 2009. A similar story of success is Netflix, which in just the last year has added 8 million new subscribers. With over 2,000 employees and a physical presence in every state, Netflix is continuing to grow. And there's a reason for it. Open, accessible, consumers making the choice. That's what we seek to protect. So why are the basic rules of the road essential to the continued growth of these companies? By preventing blocking and unreasonable discrimination, the internet can remain a source of innovation and new ideas, not a platform where consumers and businesses are told which sources of news, information, and entertainment they can access. The witnesses that are here today, we are all grateful to. I want to express a very special thanks to Robin Chase, who flew from Paris, France, to be here today, only to fly back to Berlin, Germany this afternoon. That's one hell of a commitment to come here and to speak on this really extraordinarily important issue, and we're very grateful to her. And I think that this is just one example among thousands of internet innovators who understand how the CRA will hinder job creation and consumer choice. I'm also pleased that members will be presented with the economic theory supporting the FCC's rules. So, Mr. Chairman, thank you for making sure that we have this legislative hearing. I thank the witnesses, and I don't have any time to yield back.
It's all right.
Thank you.
I thank you for your comments, and we look forward to hearing from the witnesses. Obviously, as you all have been briefed, the Prime Minister of Australia is going to be speaking to a joint session of Congress, so at some point here we will recess because we're not allowed under our rules to meet during a joint session. I would like to point out how much we appreciate you being here. Ms. Chase, I didn't know, as minorities witness, you had to fly from France and back to Germany today. We could have used high technology maybe to get your testimony, take your questions. Well, we could have worked on that. I would also like to point out for the record, this is our second hearing on this topic. We had all 5 FCC commissioners before, and now we have 6 witnesses here, equally divided, I would point out, between the Republicans and the Democrats, the majority and minority. And at the conclusion of this hearing, there will have been 2 hearings, and probably one of the first times in history of the committee that the minority has actually had more witnesses on a topic than the majority. So we're trying to hear from people. We're trying to be open and fair and balanced about this, and we look forward to your testimony when we resume. So at this point, I will recess the committee until after the Prime Minister. Probably about an hour, we're guessing, by the time members go and get back, maybe a little more. So if you can kind of hang out not too far away, that would be helpful. And with that, the committee stands in recess.